Okay, we're at the Menoken farm in Burleigh County, and it's late November. It's rather balmy out here today, so we got nothing but sunshine and warmth. But we're just kind of starting to freeze up for the winter, and we thought we'd take a look at a cropping system today. And this particular cropping system was a sunflower field, and the sunflower was planted on 30-inch rows, and on 15-inch rows in between it had 10 broadleaf cover crop combination planted, and those 10 species were all broadleaf, and they were some cool and some warm as far as crop type. And I think they were put there for a number of reasons. One of the reasons was to take a look at it from the insect world and the pollinating world, and I think those are items that we need to get a better understanding. So they were going to be put there to be a food supply and attractant for the predators and the parasitoids, so that they can give us a little more balance with the pest end. And another reason was to bring in the fertility. So a number of these broadleaf covers were legumes, and they were to supply nutrient to the sunflower crop. And so basically what you're looking at is no insecticide, no fungicide, no commercial fertilizer placed on this field. The field did get pretty bad hail damage on July 31st, and we know that's gonna hurt us, but we did go forward and harvest. The harvest is on the trucks right now, and it's got portable drying unit drying it down enough where we can get it to the elevator. But it's one where we can take a look at diversity, and you bring this kind of diversity into a cropping system, and then you would ask yourself, well, what am I going to plant next year? Well, we've already had a total of 11 broadleaf plants out here. So the logical thing would be to come in with a grass next year. And we could come in with either a warm season grass or a cool season grass, but from a crop rotation viewpoint, we think that would make a good connect. The other thing that Storm and I were just talking about out here was bringing in livestock. And we think we've got a pretty good situation here where we could do some grazing on this. We've got fairly good ground cover, good armor now, and obviously we'd want to keep this. But if we bring in about 180 pair, Storm, what's your thoughts on length of time? This is 12 acres. How long would you leave them on here?
I don't know, we kind of visited about this a little bit earlier, but it'd be a fairly short duration deal. You're trying to maximize the benefits to the soil and glean a little bit with the livestock. But I think, like you said, 1 to 2 days tops on how many acres?
12 acres.
12 acres, yeah, it'd be a pretty short deal. Pretty short deal.
We still think there'd be value in bringing the livestock in from a biological end. You know, it's everything that comes off of their milk foam, it's everything that comes off their hair, it's on their hooves, and the manure, the urine, etc. But you know, it's really the biology that's in all of that we feel would be a benefit as we continue to go down the road of building soils. But I think this field is a real good example of how it takes a live plant, and this live plant giving off the root exudates can supply, you know, a lot of our needs for crop production. And of course we end up with savings in energy. We have covers working for a longer period of time building soils, and this was $17.50 an acre, Storm. So if you look at it from the viewpoint of how many days the cover crop was working for you and the total cost per acre of the covers, it gets really efficient.
Especially juxtaposing it against the absence of the fertilizer and all the other chemical inputs we normally see in these cropping systems.
Well, just the energy savings from the viewpoint, if you put it into diesel fuel equivalents, taking the commercial fertility out here would have been somewhere right in the neighborhood of 13 gallons of diesel fuel equivalent per acre of an energy savings. So we think that's pretty significant.
Yeah, so potentially $50 an acre. Roughly in today's market, that would be what we're looking at.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, a real difference. And so we were real pleased with how things appeared as far as insect damage, and we were real pleased with how things looked like as far as any leaf diseases. This was our first run at this type of system, but we were encouraged enough where we'll definitely take another look at it next year. Well, let's take a little bit of a closer look here on the soil surface. First of all, we've got armor, and something that we just don't talk enough about is bringing soil loss down to zero. And you know, we've talked about TE over the years as far as the tolerance, but really when you're talking about soil health and talking about building soils, there is no tolerance. I mean, you can't have erosion. And so one of the first things you have to do is, you know, you have to get this land base secure. And you take a look at the 10 covers in here and you can see some real good diversity in the plant types. You can see the brassica leaves, you can see the soybean and the cowpea, you can see a little bit of flax, a little bit of vetch. And so we still have all of this diversity here. Obviously livestock coming in and lightly topping some of this. Like Storm mentioned, maybe grazing them one day, I think it would be a good balance. And I think the armor on the surface plays a big role, but also what's underneath the surface. And so you take a look at these plants, and you're going to see a combination of taproot, just like we got sticking out of the soil here, and they are slightly hard. So you take a look at, we got a combination of taproot and fibrous, and you bring those two together. The fibrous is really good at building the soil aggregates, and the taproot is really good at just opening up some passageways and helping us start with the compaction layers that were created by tillage over the previous 100 years on this particular field. So it's kind of a combination of thing, and they're all playing roles. So we've got these different rooting depths. We got some real deep rooting, we got some shallow, we got some intermediate, we got the fibrous, we got the tap, we got legume, we got non-legume, we got warm season, we got cool season. All of this is happening right here on the soil surface. And so as far as what the covers do, and they've been working here all summer long. They got planted the same day as the sunflowers with the same machine on the same pass. And so this makes for a very efficient cover crop.
One of the things, I'm sitting here looking at all this cover, not only the diversity, but I'm sitting here thinking, you know, we're in the this what was a prairie ecosystem, and water being a limiting factor. How do you reconcile the fact that we're growing these covers and surely we're taking away moisture away from the cast crop? How can you explain that maybe a little bit better, Jay?
You know, that the whole moisture situation is really pretty interesting. The Menoken farm is the 5th year of crop production here, Storm, and I would have been real hesitant to have tried this the first maybe 2-3 years even, because we had to build soils, we had to build soil aggregates so that we actually could get the water in the profile. Interestingly enough, there's a low area over on the far west side of this field that the first 2-3 years held water. And now this year we've had well over 20 inches of rain, the most rain we've had since we've been out here. There's no water in that area anymore. And so, you know, it never really was a wetland, a classical wetland, but it's kind of interesting how, you know, water isn't ponding there anymore. And so coming in with the 5th year with this type of cropping scheme, I was much more comfortable. I would have been reluctant to have tried it the first couple of years because you have to build it. And we have to build the soils, we have to build the capacity to store the water. We have to be able to physically get the water into the profile. And I think we've started to achieve some of those things. And so you raise a good point. We got to be able to make this thing work from the viewpoint of cutting back on ET, the evapotranspiration. And I think the covers really did a very good job of that. And then the mycorrhizal. Most of these plants are mycorrhizal, so we get a good connect between the plants. And I think our storage increased for water. We can make a system like this work.
Very interesting, Jay. I appreciate the insights on this. We're still trying to get our minds around kind of what we're seeing here, but it's certainly worth probing a little bit further, I think.
Well, and I think we're all learning on it. It's not like we've reached the end of a destination or anything. As we go down the soil health road, we have to keep reminding ourselves that, you know, we have to get these basics in place, and we have to we can accelerate some biological time with this kind of diversity and make some of this happen a little bit quicker. But it all comes back to those basics of putting armor on the surface, putting diversity, putting a continual live plant, hopefully some livestock integration, and we start to bring these things together and connect. You know, Storm, one thing out here too, I think that has made some difference, and I'll get your opinion on it, but I feel we probably harvested a little more sunlight out here than we would have if it had been strictly a monoculture on 30 inches. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, and thinking about that too, particularly with a crop like sunflowers, where you have the opportunity for that sunlight to make it all the way to the ground, it seems undoubtedly that you're able to at least double down on that with that active plant, that solar panel out there in between the rows, certainly.
We got some movement of earthworms, not today, however, but you definitely can tell where we've got some pore spaces opening up here. Looks like we got a little green material too yet, Storm, on the covers. Any thought on that?
You know, I was kind of curious. You know, it's obviously very cold today, but did you guys stay warm later, longer? Was it wetter? I'm just surprised at how green it is out here right now.
Yeah, we had a real wet fall. We had a real wet May, and then this fall was wet again. In between, we were very dry, but which just lends itself to the need for having the capacity to hold that water. And we have to put ourselves in a position to fill a profile when we can fill it. And I think that's real important. The other thought on looking at any of the green material is our harvesting sunlight. So it allowed us to probably harvest sunlight out here for quite some period of time. You look at the whole carbon equation, when we minimized disturbance, in this case we put in a no-till system on this field 5 years ago, that reduced the loss of carbon. But the other part of that equation is we have to have live plants to build our carbon, to put carbon in. So great that we suppressed the loss of the carbon, but now we got to be able to add carbon. And we got to be able to harvest sunlight, and lots of sunlight, getting maximum sunlight harvest. And I think it's really part of the whole carbon equation.
Did I hear you correctly? Basically what you're saying, in a really high-end no-till system, we can slow the loss of carbon or degradation of the resource, but without living covers, we're not going to be able to add carbon to the system with our traditional crop rotations?
You know, for many years we had terminated all sunlight harvest at harvest time on our cropping systems in this part of the state. And so basically we didn't allow anything green to grow after harvest time. And when you start looking at that whole equation and comparing that to nature, you start to see some fallacies in that. And one of them, of course, is that you really limit your amount of time that you can harvest sunlight. And so as we started putting covers in after harvest, we extended that period of time that we can actively harvest sunlight and have carbon actually go into the soil system.
So basically the equation would be harvest more sunlight to build more carbon to create more resilience so that we could be sustainable or perhaps even regenerate the system?
Well, there's a real big difference in our systems as far as quality of the systems to do what you just said. And you take a look at a no-till system with one or two crop types, and now compare that to a no-till system that would have all four major crop types and cover crops and livestock integration. There really would be there'd be quite a difference in the soil quality between those two systems. Anytime we bring in the more diversity, longer periods of time to harvest sunlight, we bring in livestock integration, this is an opportunity to build more soil aggregates, put the pore space back, bring the water cycle forward, and bring the nutrient cycle forward so that they fully function one more time.
You know, in thinking about bringing the livestock back to the land, and one of the things I see resistance from not only no-tillers but conventional people as well, is they don't see the livestock as really a necessary component to building that soil aggregate stability. And I guess my question is, if you chose not to graze into the livestock, what do you think would be the advantages or disadvantages about just leaving this as it is?
I think that's definitely an option, Storm, and people that don't have livestock, bringing in the covers and leaving this cover here completely. You know, to me it maybe isn't quite as high a level that you can go when you bring the livestock in, but it's certainly a very good thing. I mean, with this diversity, with good armor on the surface, I mean that's a huge step up. And if you take a look at our cropping systems in this country, ones that would have this opportunity without livestock that could integrate this and bring it forward in their system, that would move that system forward from the viewpoint of soil health.
One of the questions I have Can we take this to a higher level than existed prior to the disturbance or the settlement where we broke this land?
That's a tremendous goal, and I think that's the goal we should be working toward. And time is going to play out in the future. That's going to let us know if we're able to do this or not. But I think that should be our goal. And when you're talking about landscapes, you know, we have the advantage here between Bismarck and Pierre of having a wonderful written description of the landscape in the Lewis and Clark journals from 200 years ago. And it really illustrated the role that animals played. And really what we've captured in this county in regards to using that information in our grazing systems that we're presently using today, man has become the predator, because in the journals it would describe the predators and how they followed huge amounts of animals. And it wasn't described as a frontal attack on the animals. It was described more from the viewpoint that they cleaned up the old, the weak, the sick, the fat, etc. And now our rancher is the predator. And the livestock are on that land a very short period of time, because in the journals these animals were generally moving. And I think in our situation here, I think the rancher can play the role of the predator and the livestock can be moving. And we've patterned our grazing systems after that. After they come off these perennial grass systems and they come onto cropland, I think we can play a similar role again. They just aren't going to be here long. They're going to be moving slowly across the landscape.
Your take on the statement that overgrazing is a man-made invention?
Well, I think overgrazing is probably, from the classical sense, probably occurred when the bison were here. It probably occurs now. And I think really recovery is what we have to have in mind as our goal. How much recovery are we planning to give this? And I think you can look at once over systems or twice over systems, and that amount that you remove is going to have a big impact on the amount of recovery time you're willing to give it. And I think in our systems, we typically like to remove a small amount but give it a long recovery period. So that's always been the advantage of coming in with real high pasture numbers. You are allowed to, your exposure period gets real small, but your recovery period gets very large.
Is cover crops, and the distinction that I'm seeing that I'm wanting to get your take on is what is the tool and what is the goal? And oftentimes it appears like the growing the cover crops has become the goal. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, growing the cover crop to us is definitely a tool. And our goal is still soil health and returning the functionality to the soils. The advantage the cover crop can have, especially what we've seen with high diversity cover crop combinations, is you can actually accelerate biological time. So you can make something happen quicker. And I think when it comes to building soils, you know, we've all seen the old information about how many years or centuries it would take to build an inch of soil. And I think in our present production model, that's probably still pretty close to true. Until we bring soil loss down, wind and water erosion loss down to zero, and until we start applying all of these principles, when we bring in cover crop combinations or we bring in mob grazing, those type of tools, we can actually start to make something happen much quicker.
Very good.